Monroe, Louisiana, was a peaceful small town, where the locals lived in familiarity and safety. But behind its serene exterior lay a dark tragedy that was about to unfold, involving people no one would have suspected, a respected sheriff, a young pregnant girl, and a family torn apart. The story begins with Sheriff Malcolm Gaines, a middle-aged man respected and admired in the community. He had served in law enforcement for many years, becoming a symbol of order and justice. But behind this trustworthy facade lay dangerous secrets that were gradually being revealed. Malcolm wasn't the perfect man everyone thought he was. He had been having an illicit affair with Mandy Brooks, a 19-year-old girl. What started quietly, as secretive encounters, soon spiraled into a chain of events leading to an unimaginable, horrific end. Mandy Brooks was a young woman from an ordinary family in Monroe. She met Malcolm at a community event the sheriff had organized. Initially, she was drawn to his power and calm demeanor, but Mandy quickly became entangled in a dangerous relationship. She knew it was wrong. Malcolm was married and had his own family, but his charm and promises made it hard for her to stop. At first, everything seemed calm and discreet. Mandy had no idea she was about to be caught in a trap with no way out. Cindy Gaines, Malcolm's wife, had long lived with the suspicion that her husband was unfaithful. A strong and independent woman, she chose to overlook the signs of Malcolm's infidelity for the sake of her family and children. Cindy understood her husband's position and reputation in the community and didn't want to tarnish that image, even though her trust in him had long faded. She accepted the bitter truth that the man she loved had changed, but for the sake of their children and the community, she endured in silence. However, things began to spiral out of control when Mandy discovered she was pregnant. This news turned her life upside down. Fear and confusion overwhelmed her as she faced difficult decisions. Should she keep the baby? Should she tell Malcolm? Meanwhile, Malcolm, who had once promised to take care of her, started to distance himself. He was terrified that if the truth came out, his career and reputation would be ruined. He tried to persuade Mandy to keep quiet, even going as far as threatening her, saying her mother's safety would be at risk if she revealed the affair. The sense of betrayal and pressure weighed heavily on Mandy. She felt trapped in a situation with no escape. She was no longer the cheerful, carefree girl she once was. Now, she was entangled in a fierce mental battle. At the same time, Cindy Gaines, still living in her home, silently continued to bear the coldness of Malcolm. The cracks in their marriage were becoming more evident, and Cindy could no longer pretend that everything was fine. One hot summer night, when the quiet town of Monroe was cloaked in stillness, a horrifying scream tore through the silence. A neighbor near Malcolm's house discovered the sheriff brutally murdered inside his own home. Blood was everywhere, and his body was beaten beyond recognition. There were no signs of forced entry. The police arrived immediately at the scene and began an intense investigation. Detective Maria Tillman, a seasoned investigator with years of experience, was assigned to the case. When she arrived at the scene, something about the atmosphere signaled to her that this wasn't a typical murder. This was a personal attack, brutal, and with none of the chaos typical of crimes committed by strangers. Maria could feel the tension and suppressed emotions in that house. The clues left behind suggested that the killer had a deep connection with the victim. The first person Maria focused her suspicions on was Cindy Gaines, Malcolm's wife. No one knew the true nature of their relationship better than Cindy, and with all she had endured for so long, could she have been the one to end Malcolm's life? Cindy was called to the police station for questioning. Surprisingly, she didn't seem overly shocked or horrified to hear about her husband's murder. Instead, she remained calm, almost detached. During the interrogation, Cindy spoke about her marriage to Malcolm, about the infidelities and betrayals she had endured for years. Although she tried to keep her composure, Maria noticed the exhaustion and pain in Cindy's eyes. Cindy's statements only deepened Maria's suspicions. Why was a woman who had just lost her husband so composed? Could she have been involved in Malcolm's death, or was this simply the calm of someone long accustomed to pain? Detective Maria Tillman knew this investigation would be anything but straightforward. What she was dealing with wasn't just an ordinary murder case, it was a complex web of personal relationships, suppressed emotions, and long-standing betrayals. After interrogating Cindy Gaines, although she hadn't admitted anything, her composed demeanor left Maria even more determined to uncover the truth. As Maria continued her investigation, other clues began to emerge. One of the key figures in this story was Mandy Brooks, the young girl entangled with Malcolm, now pregnant with his child. Mandy was summoned for questioning, and as she entered the interrogation room, her youthful, fragile appearance couldn't conceal the fear and tension she carried with her. Mandy began recounting her relationship with Malcolm. At first, it all seemed like a fairy tale to her. Malcolm, a man of power and prestige, had promised to care for and protect her. She believed his words and felt loved, despite knowing deep down that what they were doing was wrong. However, as time went on, those promises began to unravel. Malcolm's attentiveness started to wane, and his behavior became increasingly erratic and distant. The turning point came when Mandy discovered she was pregnant. She had been terrified to break the news to Malcolm, unsure of how he would react. When she finally did, the reaction wasn't what she expected. Instead of support, Malcolm became cold and panicked. He told her in no uncertain terms that the pregnancy had to remain a secret. If the affair and the baby were exposed, it would destroy not only his career but also his entire life. He warned her about the consequences, going as far as to threaten her, saying that her own mother could be in danger if she revealed the truth. Sitting in the interrogation room, Mandy's voice quivered as she described the weight of those threats and the emotional turmoil she had been through. She had felt utterly trapped. She knew she couldn't go to the authorities. Malcolm was the sheriff, after all, and he held all the power. She had no one to turn to. As Maria listened, she couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for Mandy. Here was a young girl caught in a situation far beyond her control, manipulated by a man who had used his position and authority to exploit her. But Maria also knew that Mandy wasn't telling the whole story. Something was missing, some key detail that could tie everything together. Mandy was clearly hiding something, whether out of fear or guilt, Maria couldn't be sure yet. Meanwhile, another figure loomed large in the investigation: Tyler Gaines, Malcolm's son. Tyler had always been close to his father, but in recent months, their relationship had grown strained. As it turned out, Tyler had also been involved with Mandy at one point, long before she started her affair with Malcolm. When Tyler found out about the relationship between his father and Mandy, and worse, the pregnancy, he was devastated. Tyler was called in for questioning, and when he arrived, his face was a mask of anger and pain. Maria noticed the raw emotion bubbling just beneath the surface. It was clear that Tyler was struggling to contain his feelings about what had happened. He had been betrayed, not just by his father, but by Mandy as well. The discovery of the affair had shattered him. In the interrogation room, Tyler recounted how he had learned about his father's betrayal. He had overheard an argument between Malcolm and Mandy one night, during which Mandy had mentioned the pregnancy. Tyler couldn't believe what he was hearing. His father, the man he had looked up to all his life, had not only cheated on his mother but had also gotten Mandy, the girl Tyler once cared for, pregnant. It was a blow that left him reeling. As Tyler's emotions spilled out, Maria could see the depth of his anguish. He admitted that he had confronted his father about the affair, and the confrontation had turned violent. In a fit of rage, Tyler had punched Malcolm, accusing him of ruining their family and destroying everything he cared about. But he swore to Maria that he hadn't killed his father. Yes, he was furious, and yes, he had lost control in that moment, but he insisted that when he left the house that night, Malcolm was still alive. Maria believed Tyler, but the timeline of events was becoming increasingly murky. There were too many conflicting emotions and too many secrets that still hadn't been fully brought to light. She knew she had to keep digging, especially with Cindy Gaines. Cindy's calm exterior still didn't sit right with Maria. Something about the way she had handled the news of Malcolm's death suggested that she was hiding more than just emotional pain. As the investigation progressed, Maria and her team began to uncover more details about Malcolm's personal life. It turned out that Malcolm had been involved in multiple affairs over the years, and Mandy wasn't the first young woman he had manipulated. There were whispers around town about Malcolm's abuse of power, using his position as sheriff to exploit vulnerable women. These revelations painted a much darker picture of Malcolm than anyone in the community had ever imagined. But as damning as these details were, they still didn't answer the most important question: who killed Malcolm Gaines? The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, but there was still one crucial element missing. Maria had a gut feeling that Cindy held the key. She knew that Cindy had endured years of emotional torment, knowing about Malcolm's infidelity but staying silent for the sake of their children. But how much could a person take before they snapped? With these thoughts in mind, Maria prepared for a second, more intense interrogation of Cindy. She needed to press harder, to push Cindy to the breaking point where the truth would finally spill out. As Maria prepared her questions, she knew she was getting closer to the answers she sought, but she also knew that the truth, when it finally emerged, would be more devastating than anyone could have imagined. Detective Maria Tillman sat across from Cindy Gaines once again, preparing for what she knew could be the breakthrough in the case. Cindy's calm, almost detached demeanor from their first meeting had lingered in Maria's mind. Now, she was determined to push harder, to peel back the layers and reveal what Cindy was hiding. The room was quiet, the air heavy with tension as Maria began questioning Cindy about the night Malcolm was murdered. Cindy's answers were measured, as if she had rehearsed them. But as Maria pressed, asking about Cindy's long years of emotional suffering, about her knowledge of Malcolm's numerous affairs, the cracks in Cindy's facade began to show. "You must have been angry, Cindy," Maria said, her voice calm but firm. "To find out that after everything, after all the betrayal, Malcolm wasn't just having an affair. He got Mandy pregnant. That must have been the breaking point." Cindy's hands clenched in her lap, and for the first time, Maria saw a flicker of something behind her eyes. Cindy shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her carefully controlled exterior slipping ever so slightly. "I didn't kill him," Cindy whispered, but the words sounded hollow, as if she was trying to convince herself more than Maria. Maria leaned forward, her eyes locked on Cindy's. "You were in that house with him, Cindy. The blood at the scene, the chaos, it wasn't a stranger who killed him. This was personal. It was someone who knew Malcolm, someone who had been hurt by him." Cindy's breathing quickened, and her eyes filled with tears. She looked down at her hands, now trembling. For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of the truth hanging in the air. Finally, Cindy broke down. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the full weight of her pain. "I didn't mean to do it. I snapped." Maria didn't interrupt, letting Cindy's confession pour out. "That night," Cindy began, her voice shaky, "I confronted Malcolm. I had known for a long time about his affairs, but I kept quiet. I didn't want to destroy our family. But when I found out about Mandy's pregnancy, it was too much. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I told him that I knew everything, that I knew about the threats he made to Mandy. I told him he was a monster. Cindy's tears flowed freely now, her voice choked with emotion. He laughed at me. He said I was pathetic, that I would never leave him because I was too weak. He said no one would ever believe me, and that without him, I was nothing. Maria listened intently, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. I couldn't take it anymore, Cindy continued. I don't even remember picking up the vase. I just remember the rage. Years of pain, of humiliation, of being made to feel worthless, it all came out in that moment. I hit him, and he fell. And when I saw him lying there, covered in blood, I knew it was over. Maria sat back, her suspicions confirmed. Cindy had killed Malcolm, not out of cold-blooded malice, but in a moment of uncontrollable rage, the culmination of years of emotional abuse and betrayal. The confession brought a sense of closure, but it didn't make the situation any less tragic. Cindy Gaines, a woman who had once been seen as the perfect wife and mother, had been driven to murder by the man she had loved and trusted for so long. With Cindy's confession, the case was solved, but the aftermath left scars that would never fully heal. Cindy was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. During her trial, her lawyers argued that years of emotional abuse and Malcolm's manipulative behavior had pushed her to the breaking point. The jury was sympathetic but could not ignore the severity of the crime. Cindy was sentenced to 25 years in prison. As the trial unfolded, the town of Monroe was left reeling from the revelations about Malcolm's double life. The community had once seen him as a pillar of law and order, but now they knew the truth, that Malcolm had used his position of power to manipulate and exploit those around him, including the women he had affairs with. The town's trust in their sheriff was shattered, and Monroe would never be the same again. For Mandy Brooks, the outcome was bittersweet. She had been freed from the constant fear of Malcolm's threats, but her life was forever changed. The affair and its tragic conclusion had left her emotionally scarred, and she struggled to move on from the trauma. But in the midst of her pain, she found an unexpected source of support, Tyler Gaines. Despite the betrayal they both had endured, Mandy and Tyler found solace in each other. They had both been victims of Malcolm's lies and manipulation, and together, they sought a way to rebuild their lives. Over time, their shared pain turned into something deeper, and they slowly began to heal. Mandy and Tyler eventually reconnected, and after months of trying to make sense of the chaos that had consumed their lives, they found love again. In a quiet ceremony, far removed from the town's prying eyes, they married, hoping to build a new life together away from the shadows of their past. In the end, the story of Malcolm Gaines, Cindy, Mandy, and Tyler became a cautionary tale of power, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of emotional abuse. What had started as an illicit affair spiraled into a grisly murder, leaving a trail of broken lives in its wake. For Detective Maria Tillman, the case was a reminder of how personal pain could drive people to do the unthinkable. She had seen it time and time again in her line of work, how the seemingly perfect lives people projected could hide dark secrets, and how love, when twisted by lies and manipulation, could lead to tragic, irreversible acts. As Maria closed the file on the case, she couldn't help but reflect on how easily things could have been different. If only Malcolm had been a better man, if only Cindy had found the strength to leave sooner, if only Mandy hadn't been drawn into his web of lies, perhaps the lives of everyone involved could have been spared the heartache. But there were no ifs in this story. Only the stark reality of what had happened: a sheriff, a teenage girl, a betrayed wife, and a son who had lost his father, all bound together by a tragedy that would haunt them for the rest of their lives.